Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Mark Givler. Got Chip Minnick here with me as always. Our last few Big Ten pre-spring previews are coming this way. Purdue actually started spring ball this week. So one of the Big Ten schools is in. I think Wisconsin is on the 8th as we sit here recording this on the 6th. And then a whole bunch of schools are going to be starting next week. But we are on to Minnesota right now. The Gophers had a pretty solid year last year under PJ Fleck. They kind of sneak up on people as they usually seem to do, and sent a lot of guys. I was just at the NFL Combine last week in Indianapolis. They had a bunch of guys there. They had like 5 or 6 guys at the Combine this year. So they're losing some talent to the NFL, and that's going to bring us to kind of our first question as we hit 3 topics on every team heading into the spring. Who is going to play quarterback for Minnesota? Chip.
Okay. It's one of these things where just based on, the fact that they're losing the transfer portal quarterback that they had from last season, you just referenced the NFL Combine. I would think Drake Lindsay would be the next man up, but, and I'm saying this with all respect to PJ Fleck and his coaching staff, I think it's going to be the kind of thing where you want Lindsay to earn the position. So just because he was the quarterback with the next reps in terms of the passing doesn't necessarily qualify him as being the best person to lead the Minnesota offense. So my long-winded answer is Drake Lindsay is my projected guess, but I withhold the right to be proven wrong over the course of spring practice.
Yeah, Lindsay's a young guy with some talent, 6'5", 230, big. This is kind of what this is like pure Minnesota quarterback here.
Yep.
Like, they've really recruited these big physical quarterbacks over the years. And he's the next one up there. Has a lot of eligibility left. Looks like he's got at least 3 years, maybe 4 to play 4, maybe. I don't know that he got into enough games. So he may have 4 years left. Yes, played in 3 games last year as a freshman, just 4 or 5 for 50 yards and a touchdown. So hard to take a lot of data from that, but definitely a guy who seems to fit the profile of what they've historically looked for. Max Brosmer was a really good player for them, and actually was talking to some people at the Combine, and he's kind of one of those sneaky, like, watch out. Let's see, he may go higher than, he may not only get drafted, but he may get drafted higher than people think. He's had a very good winter. And so he's impressed people with his arm and I think he's impressed a lot of people with his mind. He was one of the coolest interviews. I think I probably listened to 100 and some interviews from the Combine, either just standing there in person, listening to them, or going back through video and listening to interviews. And his was I was at his podium actually for like the entirety of it, and his was one of the most impressive. So that's a big replacement. I think he was a really good player for them last year. Again, NFL people seem to really like him, and was one of their kind of vocal leaders. So I think that's going to be kind of a void where you're not just replacing his talent, you're also replacing his leadership and his attitude. So that is going to be a big thing, is to make some progress on the quarterback battle. Like we talked about before, a lot of Big Ten teams have open quarterback competitions this spring. Mm-hmm. Some competitions, there's a heavy favorite, some there isn't, but a very, very large number of Big Ten teams do have an open quarterback competition this offseason. So this will be one of the more interesting ones. And kind of building off of that, some new faces. They did lose some guys in the portal. That's a couple guys in the portal. Philip Daniels to Ohio State kind of stings, but they were able to bring in some guys as well. Which of those guys, Chip, are you kind of looking at in terms of kind of showing this spring that, giving some people something to be excited about in the fall with maybe what they're going to show this spring?
Well, I mean, we're talking about the fact that, okay, a new quarterback, what would be better than to kind of develop a passing attack? So, Javon Tracy is coming over from Miami of Ohio, Malachi Coleman from Nebraska. I think that those are the obvious ones for me. I appreciate the fact that you talked about the loss of Philip Daniels. I agree with you that stings. It's just one of these things where I don't want to say that I take it for granted. Maybe Minnesota fans have kind of grown accustomed to the fact that, Minnesota under PJ Fleck, their offensive line, they brought in players via the transfer portal. So I'm just kind of expecting for them to just kind of pick up where they left off and have a traditionally, not super offensive line, but like a solid offensive line. So getting back to my answer, I'm going to go with either of the wide receivers coming in with whoever the new quarterback is. I think kind of developing that passing game chemistry is going to be essential for Minnesota this spring.
Yeah, I was a huge Malachi Coleman fan coming out of high school. I was able to see him at the All-American Bowl down in San Antonio his senior year. And I'm a little surprised that didn't work out better for everyone at Nebraska. That just felt like that was going to be like everything was there, like the opportunity was there. I think his ability is there. So that was kind of interesting to me that didn't work better at Nebraska. So I'm with you. I think Malachi Coleman is definitely a guy to watch this spring and obviously into the season. They like you said, they bring in Javon Tracy, had a great year at Miami of Ohio, was one of my big we did our like top transfer portal additions in the Big Ten. He was a guy I talked about with that. The other, I'll throw out like maybe two more names here. I really, really think the AJ Turner pickup from Marshall is important, and it's going to lead into what we're going to talk about next a little bit. But look, they've got they've done a great job with running backs, and it's not just under Fleck. You go back to all the way like Glenn Mason. They've always had good backs, and Darius Taylor is a budding superstar. But in the Big Ten, you really need more than one. So going out and getting someone like AJ Turner, who's kind of a dynamic home run hitter, to go with Darius Taylor, in my opinion, is going to give them one of the best backfields, maybe not just in the Big Ten, maybe in college football. I think they've got a chance to have a really good running back tandem there. So that's another guy I'm eager to see, like how he's doing this spring, what the reports are there for him this spring. And then, like you mentioned, we kind of briefly hit on losing Phillip Daniels, who I think was blossoming into kind of a big time player for them, was going to be maybe one of the stars of their team moving forward. They go out, they get a Dylan Ray from Kentucky. They get a couple of different guys in from the portal. And so I'm just kind of going to throw them in as a whole, I guess, instead of just talking about one of them, but just they've got like 3 new offensive linemen, I think, in the portal. So just how those guys fit, which one stands out, if they can find that right tackle replacement that I'm sure they had Phillip Daniels penciled in for that right tackle position. He started the last few games last year as a redshirt freshman. And so that to me is going to be a key for them is to replace him and kind of see who is emerging this spring in that role. So Chip, this brings us into our third thing, which was your creation here. And it can't, I think we've talked about it a little bit in terms of, I think we've mentioned the guys they're hoping do this, but it is, can Minnesota broaden its offense beyond Darius Taylor? Because you need more than one guy. You need to have multiple weapons on offense to really get where they want to go. Cause I think the pieces are there to be pretty good on defense.
Yes. And I freely admit, in terms of like the direction of the questions, it was intentional. So, the fact that we started off with, all right, the quarterback, who is that going to be? Who's it going to wind up? The fact that, you and I are of a similar mindset in terms of the transfer portal additions with wide receivers. The reason why I asked kind of just a very open question with the idea of Minnesota broadening its offense beyond Darius Taylor is, to your point, I agree with you. I think Darius Taylor is a budding superstar. When you look at the year that he had, averaging nearly 5 yards a carry, 1,000-yard rusher, that's great. Guess what? Opposing defenses within the Big Ten, what are they going to do? They're first and foremost, any opposing defensive coordinator is going to be of the mindset that, okay, let's crowd the line of scrimmage and make things miserable and difficult for Darius Taylor, which kind of goes back to the reason why it's so important that Minnesota, if not necessarily develop a passing attack that's going to, completely upend what they want to do on offense, but, something that will allow for, kind of keeping the opposing defenses off balance. Are we going to run it? Are we going to pass it? So that's why I think it's going to be this spring. It's going to be so important for them, if not necessarily to name a starter at quarterback, to have a good idea as to who could be possibly the starter when they open up the season, and then getting those wide receivers, getting that chemistry with the quarterback, getting that cohesiveness and chemistry established, because it's going to be important for the Minnesota offense overall.
Yeah, they've got to have a little balance, obviously, and they had they had pretty good balance last year. I thought it took them a little bit of time, and Max talked about that at the combine, just transferring, getting all the different pieces together, transferring in and everything else. But they've got to continue that and maybe even take it up. Like Daniel Jackson was very good for them last year. He's gone at receiver. They bring in some very talented guys. I think part of this is, in terms of what we're asking, next quarterback, transfer portal additions, other guys stepping up to help Darius Taylor offensively. These are all, to me, time sensitive. They got to get off to a better start. If they want to be a 9-10 win type of team, one that competes and scares some people in the Big Ten, they can't have the slow starts. It was talked about last year how they just didn't get off to the greatest start. It took some time for the offense to gel. That can't happen again if they want to, reach their potential. So that to me these are pressing questions. That's why we're talking about them here as pre-spring questions, because I think they really got to figure this stuff out in the spring so that they can hit the ground running when fall camp opens.
I completely agree. I think, it's kind of ironic that, we're talking about right before the spring. Some of the first games have been moved to Thursday nights, and Minnesota, they traditionally have been that Thursday night season opener. They open up against the University of Buffalo, and that's fine. But to your point, it's like they can't come out sluggish in their non-conference and have it carry over into conference play. They need the offense to be, if not necessarily at midseason peak, but they have to have the pieces in place, well established, so by the time they get into conference play, they feel comfortable if they are going up against a team that is really good against the run or the pass, that they feel comfortable that they have some flexibility there.
And it'll be nice, like not opening with Ohio State or even like North Carolina this year. Like they'll be able to kind of ease their way a little bit more. I think their defense has a chance to be pretty darn good, which is why all of our questions here were mostly around the offense. Coy Parrish is going to be a superstar if he's not already. So like they've got a lot of good things going here. And it's just, again, how quickly can they get everything to click offensively? So I think that's going to be a key, obviously, for them, is just to make sure they try and get things moving a little bit more quickly this year than last year. But Chip, any final thoughts here? We'll do a schedule analysis after the spring, but this is kind of like a dark horse team for me in the Big Ten.
I would agree with that. I think that, after the spring, we'll have a better understanding. And like you said, Mark, I think post-spring, the schedule analysis certainly lends itself to getting a better feel for, what we believe Minnesota can do. I know that Ohio State will be hosting Minnesota at the beginning of October. So that's obviously a big game for Minnesota. But overall, I think PJ Fleck has this program well positioned to not only make it to a bowl game, but probably a premier bowl game if everything falls into place as obviously the people of Minnesota hope.
Yep. So big spring for the Gophers. I think expectations are quietly very high there, just based on what they've brought in via the portal, what the star power they have returning. They've got a difference maker on both sides of the ball returning. So as young players, so they really had a great freshman class last year that was able to contribute. So we will be keeping an eye on them. We'll check back on them after spring, see how they're doing, see what the new guys look like. But we got a few more of these left, so we'll be on the next one here in a minute. But appreciate everyone watching here on youtube.com/@SaturdayGlory, and you can download this at any podcast platform of choice. But again, thanks everyone for watching, listening, and we will be back here soon.